Hello, and welcome to How to Help a Hero, Social Support for First Responders. My name is Adriane Peak, and I am a master's candidate of the Interdisciplinary Studies at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan in Kelowna, BC, Canada. The program I am in is called Community Engagement, Social Change, and Equity. This recording and transcript for this virtual talk is available also on my website at adrianepeak.com, as well as many other videos and presentations on my research in mental health with first responders and psychological first aid. When we need help, we call an emergency number such as 911, and we activate the emergency medical services system. And first responders, paramedics, firefighters, police, etc., are notified to assist you. These individuals continuously bear witness to the trauma resulting from human accident and injuries. As a result, these individuals can experience psychological distress called vicarious trauma, which is the cumulative effect of working with victims and survivors of traumatic events. Vicarious trauma is often grouped with other mental health conditions, such as secondary traumatic stress, occupational stress injury, secondary victimization, compassion fatigue, moral injury, countertransference, and burnout, etc. The strain of these predicaments can lead to long-term psychological illnesses, such as post-traumatic stress disorder. An absence of empirical attention surrounding the mental health of first responders, compounded with the stigma of seeking help, has greatly impacted individual behaviors and access to support. Many institutional, psychological, and cultural aspects have created an environment where support systems are often inadequate. Through the lenses of medical and psychological anthropology, this article and presentation discusses the impact of cultural themes of heroism and social expectations, both internal and external, to the first responder community. Using an interdisciplinary approach and considering the changing landscape of first responder mental health care, this paper seeks to contribute to the discussion of the ongoing challenges of vicarious trauma and mental health support for first responders. The research. So I'm sitting in a worn camping chair facing a small fishing lake in the backcountry of British Columbia. There are hundreds of lakes like this here, small pockets of practically untouched water where locals spend summer weekends fishing and camping. It's nearing the end of camping season now and starting to get a little chilly up at this elevation. Regardless, my cohort and I sit next to a cold campfire with our feet up on the edges of the metal barrel used to contain it. She tells me about her life as a first responder in a small town where everyone knows each other and you can't go a day without being called to help someone you may also see at the grocery store next week. The lines between work and life, so to speak, tend to be blurred, and the mental game is substantial. My head is like a filing cabinet, she says, as she motions with her hands to frame the shape of a box around her head. There's all these files in there. Some of them I haven't looked at for years. I just put them in there, put them away, and forget about them. I don't even know what's in there anymore, and then something will remind me. Her words trail off and nothing more is said, so we sit in a moment of quiet. I understand that remembering can be painful and heartbreaking, so it stands to reason that some of these files are intended to stay closed forever. The predicament of witnessing the misfortunes, misadventures, and tragedies of others is that these files continue to fill the minds of our first responders on nearly a daily basis. How does an individual negotiate the diverse and sometimes upsetting emotions that come with watching these events happen in front of them? There appears to be no one-size-fits-all prescription for this problem. As a result, these individuals can experience psychological distress, such as vicarious trauma. And the study of vicarious traumatization focuses on the cognitive effects of indirect exposure to trauma, or the witnessing of others' traumatic experiences, which can result in a negative shift in worldview. In other words, vicarious trauma is, quote, the cost of caring. or the emotional residue of exposure that individuals have from working with people and becoming witnesses to the pain, fear, and terror that trauma survivors have endured. It is the process of change that happens because you care about other people who have been hurt and feel committed or responsible to help them. Over time, this process can lead to changes in your psychological, physical, and spiritual well-being. Standish, 2014. The expectations of a hero. Through a typical day's work, first responders are tasked with helping us quickly and are expected to be able to contend with the medical or traumatic situation in which we found ourselves. From a simple laceration from a bike accident to conducting CPR on someone who is unconscious until medical transportation arrives, or trying to separate two angry people from hurting each other. First responder knowledge, skill, and experience sustain life as best as possible until they can transport the individual to the nearest hospital or the next level of care. The responsibility to attend to someone in emergency is also put upon the shoulders of the first responder from a community perspective. As a job requirement, first responders are to provide help to people in an emergency. This puts them in a space of legal duty. And if heroes are heroes because of their actions to act in ways that set them apart, then a society that demands action through law redefines the notion of who is a hero and correspondingly the nature of heroic acts. This can be seen reflected in our society as the perception that people who are not trained as first responders do not have to be heroes in an emergency. The fight, flight, or freeze response. These untrained citizens have the option of being able to redirect responsibility from themselves by calling on someone whose job it is to know what to do, no longer depending on the psychological fight response and taking action, but instead deferring to the flight or freeze response instead. Some theories are formed by the idea that we are afraid we could do something that could harm more than help, for which we would have to account for later. Heroic acts are then evaluated according to moral norms and social aspirations, reduce our adorations and affections for our everyday hero, and increase our expectations of their resiliency to the detrimental effects of the job. The expectations of a hero. From an interview with an emergency responder, a candid response to this consequence was that the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unreasonable as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. By instilling these expectations on these individuals because we are compensating them financially, we have created a transaction that does not factor in the cost to their mental health. And our society has historically supported this by thus socially enforcing the hero image. In an article describing the metamorphosis of the hero, Scott Allison describes what is required for a normal individual to transform into a hero in one of three ways. 1, rigorous training. 2, spiritual practice or embarking on a hero's journey. The first avenue through rigorous training is the path most familiar in the Western world. We equate countless training hours required for emergency response training as the experience needed for these individuals to prove that they have what it takes to be our everyday heroes. These steps are seen to be addressed in first responder training curriculums through scenario or live model training, where emergency situations are simulated or acted out. This practice of playing out potential events allows participants a sense of the experience to help alleviate anxieties and negative thoughts that could result in negative behavioral choices when actually encountering a real-life crisis situation. Incident response, storytelling, and social buffering. Once a first responder has attended to a call, sometimes there is no downtime to assess what they have just experienced. Most often, especially in larger, busier cities, these individuals must repack the ambulance and their supplies, clean up, and get ready to go out again. Not until they have gone home later, or maybe after a night's rest, do they have time to reflect on what they've experienced during their workday. As a standard practice in the emergency services, A debriefing session is usually held after each task, where the individuals involved will report the events that have unfolded. Sometimes this is the worker's first chance to speak about the event and perhaps receive some support from the other individuals involved. Just as when something traumatic happens in our personal lives, we can tell someone the story. Storytelling, as a means of passing down knowledge through cultures, is a widely researched theme in anthropology. Our survival has greatly depended on our ability to communicate and share, to create connections with each other as we go about our daily lives. This process of debriefing as an act of storytelling can serve as an important part of the first responders' mental health support through the social support of those around them. Through these exercises, these opportunities give support in mitigating the effects of vicarious trauma. Recent interdisciplinary studies are finding significant evidence for the importance of social support, and that higher social support leads to lower negative consequences of direct traumatization, diagnoses of PTSD, and higher positive changes after a traumatic event. Demonstrated also through the theory of the stress buffering model described by Rodriguez and Cohen, the effects of social support have been termed social buffering and is explained as the protective effect of social support from the harmful effects on stress on health and well-being, and the relationship between the extent and quality of social relationships and better mental and physical health. Research has been conducted about the positive effects of social buffering and social support on self-identity, feelings of self-worth, and control in one's life. These attributes have been found to decrease the extent of anxiety, depression, and adverse mental health among individuals. With the understanding that social support increases the well-being of individuals, an interdisciplinary approach is needed in continuing to examine the ongoing challenges of mental health support for first responders. This can be done through research methods such as ethnographical studies to achieve a better understanding through listening to lived experience. We have the most potential to help one another when we listen to each other, and by doing so can assist the remedial work needed to close the gap in mental health services available to first responders. With the appreciation of how current training protocols support the relationships of social support that are immediately available to first responders, we can see that they are a positive influence on their mental health. By recognizing this importance, the argument for continuous improvement and expansion of social support resources available to first responders alongside their current training protocols will only aid in giving trainees the confidence instilled through experience and knowledge that allows first responders to run in and face death while all others are running out. A large part of my volunteer work and personal passion in conjunction with my master's project has been introducing people to psychological first aid training, which I believe is a great way to support the social support aspect of first responder training and can also be incorporated in many other applications. On my website, adrianepeak.com, and on my nonprofit project website, saveourshipsociety.com, you will find many more presentations, psychological first aid information, and mental health resources for all. So thank you so much for listening to my talk. And if you have any questions about my work, please feel free to email me at adrianepeak@gmail.com anytime.